My name is Emma Hartley, 35 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the invisible one in the Hartley family. Not unloved, at least not in the traditional sense, but quietly pushed to the margins, where my successes were politely ignored, my opinions dismissed, and my worth measured only by how much I could support the family without taking any credit. This Christmas was supposed to be just another performance. The Hartley Christmas dinner was always an event. Ornate silverware polished until it gleamed, crystal glasses reflecting the glow of the chandelier, and food served in courses by the staff who had been with us for decades. It was less about family and more about status, a tradition my father upheld as strictly as the accounting ledgers of the company he built. The Hartley name was more than just our surname. It was stamped on the side of the glass headquarters downtown. My grandfather had started Hartley Industrial Solutions back in 1965 with nothing but a single machine shop and a dream. My father, Richard Hartley, took over in the late 80s and turned it into a regional manufacturing powerhouse worth tens of millions. We were, in the eyes of the Boston business world, the perfect dynasty. But perfection has a way of hiding the cracks. Those cracks had been widening for years. My older brother, David, 40, was the golden child, groomed to take over since birth. He had the confidence of a CEO and the work ethic of someone who thought turning up at the golf course counted as a board meeting. My younger brother, Ryan, 32, was the charming wild card, using the family name to start short-lived ventures that Dad bailed out again and again. And me? I was the one who quietly kept the books balanced, who caught operational errors before they became disasters, who modernized systems behind the scenes. My title was Operations Director, but my real job was keeping the company from collapsing under my brother's incompetence. I didn't complain. I didn't fight. I stayed in my lane. Until last Christmas. I arrived early that evening, the snow crunching under my boots as I walked up the stone steps of the Hartley estate. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon rolls drifted out into the cold air when the door opened. Inside, I found my brothers already gathered around the fire, glasses of whiskey in hand, laughing at some private joke. "Emma," David said without looking up, "still working those long hours? You should relax more. Not like the company really needs you to." He trailed off with a smirk. Ryan grinned. "Yeah, let the real decision-makers handle it." I gave them the kind of polite smile I had perfected over the years. The one that said, "I'm not rising to that bait." We were halfway through dinner, the air thick with the usual mix of expensive perfume, turkey gravy, and barely hidden family politics, when Dad suddenly stood at the head of the table and tapped his glass. The sound rang sharp and clear. "I have an announcement," he said, looking every bit the commanding patriarch. After 40 years of building Hartley Industrial Solutions into what it is today. He paused for dramatic effect, savoring the way all eyes were on him. "I've sold the company." Forks clattered against plates. "You what?" I heard myself say, but not loud enough to interrupt the rush of reactions. David and Ryan erupted into cheers, loud, obnoxious, triumphant. They clinked glasses like this was the best Christmas gift they could have received. Dad raised a hand for silence. "The deal is done. $50 million. Granite Peak Holdings is the new owner." I swallowed the sudden lump in my throat, my mind racing. Granite Peak Holdings. Then he smirked. "And before anyone asks, no, you kids aren't getting a dime. Your mother and I are using the money for ourselves. The rest goes into a foundation. Consider it my legacy." The words hit me like a physical blow, but outwardly I remained still. It was a skill I had learned long ago. How to lock my expression into something unreadable while inside, the temperature dropped to ice. I set down my fork, folded my hands, and looked at him across the long stretch of the table. "Who's the lucky buyer?" I asked, my voice calm, measured. "Granite Peak Holdings," he repeated, clearly enjoying the weight of the name. "Smart group. Aggressive. They'll take the company places." I let a small smile tug at the corner of my mouth. "Then you sold it to me." The room went utterly silent. David's laugh died halfway out of his throat. Ryan blinked like he'd misheard. My mother froze with her wine glass halfway to her lips, and my father's jaw, strong, authoritative, and so certain of his control, actually dropped. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. I wanted the words to settle, to burn their way through the disbelief, to make them understand that the invisible daughter they had dismissed for years was about to rewrite the entire story of the Hartley family. Somewhere deep inside me, a part of my heart that had been starved for decades began to stir. This Christmas was going to be different. Very different. For a few seconds after I said the words, nobody moved. The only sound in the dining room was the faint ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. My father's face went through an entire slideshow of emotions: confusion, disbelief, irritation, before landing on a mask of skepticism. "What are you talking about, Emma?" he asked finally, his voice low, controlled, as if he was trying to keep the conversation from tipping into chaos. I leaned back slightly in my chair, keeping my tone casual as though we were discussing the weather. "Exactly what I said. Granite Peak Holdings is mine. I own it. Which means—" I gestured toward him with an open hand. "I own Hartley Industrial Solutions now." David laughed first. A short, sharp sound, more mockery than humor. "Right. And I'm the King of England. You're telling us you somehow bought Dad's company? With what? Your operations director salary?" Ryan smirked, shaking his head. "She's bluffing, trying to get back at you for not giving her a payout." I didn't respond to either of them. I kept my eyes locked on Dad, because I knew in that moment the only person whose reaction mattered was his. His grip on the stem of his wine glass tightened. "You expect me to believe you had 50 million lying around?" he said, voice edged with disbelief, but also, just faintly, a note of unease. I shrugged. "Not lying around. I built it, over the last 10 years. And just like that, I was back in my old apartment 10 Christmases ago, the year I decided I wasn't going to keep playing by their rules. When I was 25, I'd already been working at the company for 5 years. I had ideas, real, tangible strategies for how to modernize operations, cut costs, and expand into new markets. I'd spent months putting together a detailed proposal. Dad listened for exactly 7 minutes before pushing the folder back toward me. "This is all nice theory, Emma, but we're doing fine the way we are. Let the people with real experience handle the direction of the company." He didn't mean people with real experience. He meant your brothers. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I realized something. I could stay and keep fighting for scraps of respect, or I could step out of their shadow completely. I chose the latter. I left Hartley Industrial Solutions the following spring, officially pursuing other opportunities. My resignation barely caused a ripple in the family. David told me not to burn out in my next job. Ryan joked that I'd be back in 6 months. They didn't realize I'd already started laying the groundwork for my own company. I launched Summit Core Solutions with the $45,000 I'd scraped together in savings. At first, it was just me and a rented desk in a shared workspace. I did consulting work for mid-size manufacturers who needed operational overhauls. Exactly the kind of work Hartley Industrial wouldn't let me touch. Every dollar I made went back into the business. For the first 2 years, I lived on instant noodles, took the bus instead of owning a car, and worked 16-hour days. I didn't take vacations. I didn't date. I didn't tell a single family member what I was doing. By year 3, Summit Core was turning real profit. I started hiring people who were better than me in their fields: logistics experts, supply chain strategists, efficiency engineers. We built a reputation for fixing broken systems in record time. But my real break came when a client introduced me to a small private equity group looking for operational expertise on their acquisitions. They needed someone who could step in, streamline, and maximize profitability before reselling. It was the perfect match. The group and I partnered on several deals. The profits were life-changing. Eventually, I bought out one of the founding partners and rebranded the firm as Granite Peak Holdings. We went after underperforming but fundamentally solid manufacturing companies, turning them around in 18 to 24 months. And for the last 2 years, I'd been watching Hartley Industrial Solutions like a hawk. Dad's outdated management style, David's expensive vanity projects, Ryan's constant consulting expenses. It was all eroding the company's value. I didn't have to sabotage anything. They were doing that on their own. I just had to wait until the timing was right. 6 months ago it was. Through a network of intermediaries, I made an anonymous offer. My father saw Granite Peak Holdings and dismissed it as just another faceless investment firm. He never even looked beyond the name. Until tonight. I came back to the present, my brothers still staring like they couldn't decide if I was lying or insane. My father leaned forward slightly, studying my face. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that I've been negotiating with my own daughter for the past 6 months?" "Yes," I said, "and you accepted my offer." David scoffed. "Why would she even want it? It's a mess." I finally looked at him. "Because I know how to fix it, and because it was never yours to ruin." The words hung in the air, sharp and cold. I didn't care that their Christmas had just been ruined. Mine was just getting started. The silence didn't last. "This is a joke," David said, breaking it with a scoff that dripped condescension. "You think you can just stroll in here on Christmas and claim you own the company Dad built? You're delusional." "David." Dad's voice cut through the room like a blade. He didn't look at him, though. His eyes stayed locked on me. "Do you have proof?" I reached into my handbag and pulled out a thin leather folder. Inside were copies of the signed purchase agreements, board approvals, and transfer confirmations. I slid it across the table. "I knew you wouldn't take my word for it." Dad hesitated before opening it, scanning the top pages, his jaw tightening with each line. Ryan leaned over his shoulder, his breath smelling faintly of wine. "Granite Peak Holdings, CEO, Emma Hartley." He stumbled back slightly as if the words themselves had weight. "You hid this from us," David accused. I set my wine glass down carefully. "Yes, and I had to, because if you'd known, the deal never would have happened." "Damn right," David shot back. "You went behind your own family's back." "You mean the same family that's been telling me for years that I had no role in the real business?" I kept my tone even. "That I was too cautious, too small to think big?" Ryan opened his mouth to speak, then thought better of it. Dad closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "Why, Emma? Why do this? You could have—" "Come to you?" I interrupted. "I did. 10 years ago. And you told me to leave the big ideas to the men in the family." He flinched, just barely, but enough for me to see it. David wasn't done. "What's the plan, then? Fire everyone? Cut costs? Sell off the assets?" I looked at him steadily. "The plan is to fix the company before it collapses completely, which, at the rate you've been draining resources, would have happened in the next 2 years. Ryan's head jerked toward me. "What are you talking about?" "Lavish expense accounts, unprofitable side projects, client relationships being neglected." I let my gaze drift deliberately to David. "And questionable consulting fees that don't seem to go anywhere useful." David's face flushed a deep red. "You can't prove—" "I can," I said softly. "And if I have to, I will." The table went still again, but this time it was a heavier silence, one that felt like it might break under its own weight. Finally, Dad stood, slow and deliberate, pushing his chair back without looking away from me. "We'll discuss this privately," he said. "Now." I followed him down the hallway into his study, the one room in the house where we were never allowed to play as kids, where business was conducted behind a closed mahogany door. When he shut it behind us, the noise from the dining room dulled to a low murmur. He moved to the window, staring out at the snow-dusted hedges, his hands clasped behind his back. "I misjudged you," he said finally. "That's one way to put it." He turned to face me. "You've built something impressive. I'll admit that. But you blindsided me, Emma. On purpose." Yes, I said, because the company needed saving and I knew you'd never let me do it if you had the choice. His jaw worked as he weighed his next words. You think this is just about business? It's about legacy. My legacy. Our name means something in this city. It can still mean something, I replied, but not if it's tied to a sinking ship. A long pause. Then, what happens to me in your plan? You'll be chairman emeritus, I said. Advisory only, public face if you want it, but no operational control. His brow furrowed. So you'd keep me as a figurehead. Call it what you like. It's the best way forward. For the company and for you. He exhaled slowly, a sound somewhere between frustration and resignation. And your brothers? That depends on whether they're willing to actually work for their positions, I said. If not, they're out. His eyes searched mine for a long moment. You really think you can hold this family together after this? I didn't look away. That's not my job anymore, Dad. My job is to run the company, the family. That's up to all of us. Another silence. He finally nodded once, curtly. We'll see how this plays out. When I left the study, the dining room was quieter. My brothers were speaking in low tones, my mother sipping her wine with that fixed smile she wore whenever she wanted to appear unfazed. As I passed, David shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. Ryan avoided my eyes entirely. The first cracks had formed, and I knew from experience, once cracks appear, the whole thing can shatter. I barely slept. I lay awake counting the seconds between the furnace switching on and the radiator clicking, replaying every conversation from dinner as if I could edit them in hindsight. At 7:12 a.m., I gave up pretending, showered, and dressed in the only suit I'd packed. A charcoal jacket with neat shoulders and a white blouse that felt like armor. By 8:40, I was at my laptop in the breakfast nook, the house too quiet for a holiday morning. The subject line was already cued in my PR team's draft. Granite Peak Holdings completes acquisition of Hartley Industrial Solutions. The release was embargoed for 9 a.m. Eastern. 2 minutes to go, my phone buzzed with a text from Nora, Granite Peak's head of communications. Reporters are lined up. Trade press first, then local business desk. Town hall at 11, still good? Yes. We'll start on time, I typed back. At 9 o'clock on the dot, the press wire fired. My inbox became a slot machine, new emails blinking into existence, requests for comment, congratulations from old clients, calendar holds from the bank. I refreshed once, twice, then stopped. There was nothing more to push. The message was out. Behind me, someone cleared a throat. I turned to find my mother, robe cinched tight, a coffee mug in hand. She glanced at the screen, read the headline, and exhaled through her nose. So it's official, she said. It's official, I confirmed. Your father is in his study, she added. He's been there since 6. He hasn't said a word. I nodded, closed the laptop, and stood. I have to go to the plant. 11 o'clock. She reached to straighten my collar, the way she used to when I was 10 and headed to a school presentation. Don't let them talk over you, she murmured. I won't, I said, and surprised us both by hugging her. The snow had turned to sleet by the time the car pulled up outside the headquarters. The glass facade reflected a gray sky and a familiar logo that would change in a matter of weeks. In the lobby, Janet, the receptionist who'd watched me grow up, rose halfway from her chair and then seemed to remember the headline. Ms. Hartley, she said, voice uncertain. Janet, I answered, using the same steady tone I'd used for years. Good to see you. Her shoulders loosened a fraction. We had planned the day in blocks. At 10 o'clock, I met with the plant supervisors. 5 people who kept the place running even when the executive suite forgot it was a factory, not a showroom. At 10:40, a quick pass with finance to confirm payroll, vendor schedules, and cash flow. At 11 o'clock sharp, the all hands. The supervisors' meeting was the first test. I walked in with 2 of my Granite Peak team, Luis, operations turnaround, and Maya, HR transitions. and without preamble said, "No jobs are being cut today." Heads lifted. Someone let out the breath they'd been holding. "There will be changes," I continued, "but they'll be based on performance and process, not politics. Safety standards will be first, then on-time delivery, then quality assurance. If we fix those, the rest follows." "Will the product line stay?" asked Ramesh, head of machining, practical as ever. "We're pausing the boutique prototypes," I said, thinking of the expensive showpieces David had pushed for trade shows. "We'll double down on the top 3 SKUs with the best margins and lowest return rates. We'll add a second shift only when on-time delivery is above 96% for 8 consecutive weeks." Ramesh scribbled. "That's reasonable." Reasonable. It wasn't fireworks, but it was what we needed. Finance was harder. Paula, the controller, slid a folder toward me. "Quarterly burn is higher than the board saw. 2 supplier invoices are 90 days past due. And Emma, there are irregularities in consulting expenses." She didn't have to say whose. I nodded once. "Freeze new discretionary spending. Pay the critical vendors today. I'll address the irregularities." "Address? How?" she asked. "By tomorrow," I said. "You'll have written instructions." At 10:57, we stepped into the main floor for the town hall. 200 employees gathered under sodium lights, coats still damp from the sleet, eyes on the temporary platform someone had set up near the loading bay. The rumor mill had already spun. I could feel it in the air. When I took the microphone, the echo of the warehouse swallowed the first second of my voice, and then it didn't. "My name is Emma Hartley," I began. "Many of you know me. I worked here for 10 years. I learned the night shift coffee tastes like burnt pennies and that the shipping dock is windier in March than any Boston street. I also learned that this company runs on your hands, not on a name on the building." No one fidgeted. A few arms uncrossed. "As of this morning, Hartley Industrial Solutions has a new owner, Granite Peak Holdings. I run Granite Peak." I let that sit. A murmur moved through the crowd and dissolved. "Here is what happens next," I said, and ticked it off, simple as I could. "Paychecks continue on schedule, no layoffs today. Safety and quality are first. We will restore on-time delivery to above 96%. We will meet our oldest vendor debts within 30 days. We will end vanity projects. We will invest in the lines that feed your families." A hand shot up. Callie from Assembly, direct as always. "We've heard no layoffs before, and then half the line disappears 2 weeks later. Why should we believe you?" "Because I'm putting it in writing this afternoon," I said. "A 90-day no-layoff pledge, contingent on standards we can all see. Safety incidents down, on time up. You will know what you're being measured against, and you will be part of building it." She nodded slowly. "Okay." Luis stepped forward and held up a laminated sheet. "This is the first week plan," he said. 5 things. 1. Daily stand-ups on each line. 10 minutes max. 2. Red tag anything that slows you down. No blame, just visibility. 3. Maintenance backlog triage by Friday. 4. Vendor call list. Emma will make the first 5 calls herself. 5. Suggestion box with a bounty. $50 for any idea that saves a documented hour a week. That last part actually got a laugh. The good kind. I was about to close when I saw, over the crowd, a pair of suits at the back. David and Ryan, hands jammed in their pockets, faces set. I felt the now familiar cold calm settle into place. "One more thing," I said. "I know there's fear. There's also pride, and there's a way through if we do this together. We can fix what's broken without breaking each other. But I'm going to be honest. Entitlement and shortcuts are done. Results and respect are in." Applause started near the loading dock and moved forward like a wave. It didn't roar. It didn't need to. After the town hall, I shook hands until my fingers ached. People didn't ask for promises as much as they asked for clarity. Will overtime be fair? Will tools be replaced? Will schedules go up before Sunday night? Yes, yes, yes. Back in the conference room, the door had barely closed when David pushed in after me, Ryan on his heels. You humiliated us, David hissed, keeping his voice just low enough not to carry, in front of the entire staff. I told them the truth, I said. That's new. I understand it stings. Ryan folded his arms. You can't lock us out. We're family. You're executives, I said, and set 2 envelopes on the table. These are your options. David didn't touch his. Options? Option 1, step back for 90 days with full pay while we audit projects and expenses. You can apply for roles that match documented performance. Option 2, resign with severance. If you pick neither, we proceed with a formal investigation. Ryan glanced at David, then at me. An investigation into what? I met his eyes. Into what the controller flagged, and into why West Armored canceled their renewal after a strategy dinner that lasted 5 hours at a place we don't do business in. David's mouth opened, then shut. Color rose along his collar. This is a power grab, he said. This is stewardship, I answered. Decide by Friday at 5. When they left, Maya slid into the empty chair. That could have gone worse, she said. It will, I said, and felt the fatigue sweep over me. But we're pointed in the right direction. On the drive back to the house, my phone buzzed again. Nora. Trade Journal wants a quote on your family-to-owner transition. Do we give them the line about legacy? Give them the line about responsibility, I wrote. Legacy is something other people write for you. Responsibility is what you do next. I sent it and stared at the screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass. Responsibility. The word felt heavy and right. When I walked into the foyer, Dad was waiting beneath the old portrait of my grandfather, hands in his pockets, eyes on me like he was seeing me for the first time. He nodded once, the smallest concession in a lifetime of them. Town hall went well, he said. I got texts. It went honestly, I replied. He studied me for a long beat. Chairman Emeritus, he said, as if testing the shape of it. I'll be in at 9 tomorrow. I expect a desk. You'll have an office, I said, and allowed myself a small, tired smile. And a calendar invite. He almost smiled back. Almost. I climbed the stairs to my old room and sank onto the bed before I could take off my shoes. The radiator clicked, steady as a metronome. Somewhere below, cutlery rattled faintly in the kitchen, the house resettling after a long day. We had survived the announcement. The real work would start in the morning. By Thursday afternoon, the sleet had hardened into ice. The parking lot outside headquarters looked like a glass lake under the sodium lights. I'd been in back-to-back meetings since dawn. Vendor negotiations, plant walkthroughs, another tense budget review with finance. But the meeting I'd been waiting for was still ahead. At 4:45, Maya stepped into my office. They're here, she said. I knew who she meant. David and Ryan. They came in together, shoulders squared, that familiar blend of defiance and entitlement in their posture. Both held the sealed envelopes I'd given them on Monday. David dropped his on the desk first. We've discussed your ultimatum, he said. We're not stepping down. We're not resigning. We'll fight you if you try to push us out. Ryan followed, his jaw tight. And you'll lose. The employees know us. The board still has family loyalty. I leaned back, keeping my voice steady. Then I guess we move to option 3. David snorted. There was no option 3. There is now, I said, sliding a thin folder across the desk. It's the result of the forensic accounting review. It covers the last 18 months. Expense reports, vendor invoices, consulting contracts. David didn't touch it. Ryan glanced down, then back up at me, his expression unreadable. It's all legal, David said. You won't find anything that sticks. Then you won't mind if I forward it to the company's compliance officer, our external auditors, and... I tapped the corner of the file. The state's Business Crimes Division. Standard transparency. David's face flushed. Ryan's fingers tightened on the edge of the desk. This is blackmail, David hissed. No, I said calmly. It's governance, the kind you never thought you'd answer to. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Ryan stood. Fine, he said, his voice lower. We'll take the leave. 90 days, full pay. David whipped his head toward him. What are you? It's a better fight from the outside than from a courtroom, Ryan said, not looking at him. David's protest died halfway out of his mouth. He snatched up the folder, shoved it into his briefcase, and walked out without another word. Ryan followed, pausing just long enough to say quietly, You've made enemies today, Emma. Careful you don't become one yourself. When the door closed, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Maya stepped in a moment later with a small smile. That's 2 down. 2 on ice, I corrected. Not down. The next week was a blur of activity. We put the no layoff pledge in writing. Safety meetings started at 6:55 every morning. Clockwork. Vendors who hadn't answered my calls in years now picked up on the first ring. The maintenance backlog shrank. Employees began stopping me in the hall. Not to complain, but to offer ideas. Janet at reception suggested a shift swap board that cut absentee disruptions by half. Callie from assembly proposed a jig redesign that shaved 20 seconds off each unit build. $50 each, as promised. The more progress we made, the more I noticed something else. The looks. Some from relief, others from quiet suspicion, a few from open resentment. Those who'd benefited from the old system's chaos. I didn't try to convert them all. Respect was earned in results, not speeches. 2 weeks later, on a crisp Friday morning, we held our first open-floor progress meeting. Safety incidents had dropped to 0. On-time delivery was at 94%, close to our target. One vendor sent coffee and pastries to the loading dock in thanks. When the meeting ended, I stayed behind on the floor, walking the lines. That's when I saw my father leaning against a pallet stack, hands in his coat pockets, watching. You've made changes, he said. Yes, I answered, stopping beside him. They'll work, he added after a pause. If you can hold the line. It was as close to approval as he'd ever given me. Why did you sell? I asked quietly. He was silent for a long beat. I thought none of you had the stomach for it anymore, he said finally. The market's harder, margins tighter. I wanted out before it ate the rest of me. And now? I asked. He glanced at me, a flicker of something almost like pride in his eyes. Now I'm curious. 3 months later, Granite Peak renewed every key contract Hartley Industrial had been at risk of losing. We added a new logistics partner, cut defective returns by 40%, and finished the quarter with a profit for the first time in 2 years. David and Ryan never returned. David's consulting expenses had found their way into a quiet settlement agreement. Ryan had taken a VP position at a smaller firm in another state. On the first day of spring, I walked through the plant as the morning sun lit the steel beams above. Workers moved with a rhythm I hadn't seen in years. Not rushed, not sluggish, just steady. Janet waved from the front desk as I left. You're early out today, Ms. Hartley. Just Emma, I said. And yes, it's family dinner night. At 6 o'clock, I set the table at my mother's house. Dad arrived late, coat dusted with sawdust from his new woodworking hobby. As we ate, conversation stayed light. Weather, neighbors, the Red Sox's chances this year. When dessert came, Dad lifted his glass. Not slammed, just raised. To the business, he said. Still in the family, after all. I met his eyes over the rim of my glass. Still in the family, I echoed. In the weeks after, I thought about that night at Christmas when he told me I'd get nothing. How quickly they'd written me off and how satisfying it was to prove them wrong. Not with shouting or threats, but with planning, patience, and execution. The powerful message wasn't in the victory, though. It was in the work that came after. The day in, day out grind to make it better. to make it last. Revenge is sweet, but responsibility is what changes everything. And as I locked my office that evening, I knew I hadn't just bought back the family business. I'd rebuilt the family's name.